our illustrious press reviewer. James, this is the section where you normally look at the international reactions.
Yes.
So, we'll
stay with the LA Times, which is where absolutely, it's all a buzz online, and the LA Times is updating its website as news is coming in, and as I suppose speculation is mounting on all of this, and it goes back over the circumstances, the hour-long attempt to resuscitate him, and have a look at this photo archive. They've dug up a whole load of photos from his early days with the Jackson 5 right through his glory days in the 80s.
Let's have a look at these photographs full frame. They will show the actual change, won't they? I mean, that's
there's a whole series of photos showing him. Here you have him in when he was in Jackson 5. That was, I suppose, in the 80s as his career was taking off.
That's with Lisa Marie Presley,
whom he married, and this was as you say, getting progressively changing in appearance.
Part of the eccentricity, walking around with the mask to protect himself. Absolutely. He looks a bit strange there, doesn't he?
He does, and so the LA Times is saying that it was a life infused with fantasy and tragedy, and indeed the tragedy we know about, but the fantasy aspect, he had a statue of Marilyn Monroe in his Neverland Ranch. He was an ardent fan, apparently, of Charlie Chaplin, used to follow his career, best friends with Elizabeth Taylor, as we saw, married the daughter of Elvis. So a life that really had so much fantasy and tragedy in it, as the LA Times points out. And the international papers, if we have a look at some, well, we have Le Parisien here, which is one of the few French papers that actually got it out on time. A lot of them will be doing special editions, but you have the Times of Malta.
The nose,
it's on its front page.
Chin, I mean, obviously the plastic surgery.
Yeah,
there
physically
he
did have, I suppose, it deteriorated a lot with his mental state in some senses in the 80s and 90s, and we can see some of the front papers here. That's in South Africa, that's in the UK, the Daily Telegraph. The Guardian, on its front page, Richard Williams' writing says that for all his flaws, he was the greatest entertainer of his age, and he says he may have spent his last years mutating into an ever more freakish version of himself, but underneath the surface was a genuinely remarkable talent that deserved to conquer the world. And I think that sort of sums up
whether you like the music or not,
yeah.
you couldn't deny that he was a great performer, but certainly these other aspects about his personality, the allegations of child abuse, obviously that went to court.
A very controversial figure.
Two allegations from 93 and 2003 which were quashed. There was a settlement out of court with the family of one alleged victim. Obviously there's always this stain should be on his character.
This unfortunately will be part of his legacy, and the Daily Mail actually ponders the hows and whys of his death. Apparently he had an addiction to painkillers, and this is sourced by his own family, and they were worried coming up to this tour in London about the fact that he wasn't able to pick himself up out of the painkiller stupor. That's quoting directly from the Mail, who quote his family apparently.
I suppose the issue is if apparently he's undergoing a massive training schedule, physical training schedule to get fit for the tour.
4 days a week, 6 hours a day.
If you're doing that and you're popping pills, the strain on your heart must be.
I mean, he must have been under strain of some kind.
It doesn't take a doctor to say that the strain on your heart must be huge.
No, indeed. And they go on to talk about the controversies. I mean, I suppose his skin, which was one of the big controversies. An iconic black singer who became progressively more white. He attributed that to a skin disease, and I think it's fair to say that it was more than just that. And as you said, the allegations of sexual abuse, and by the time his third child was born, the Daily Mail says that who he called Blanket, quite controversially, he was in a downward spiral from which he would never emerge.
Well, it was Prince Michael I, then the other one's called Prince Michael II.
And he had another child called Paris, who was apparently...
it's the whole detachment from reality of being, so rich, so young, a childhood lived in the focus of the world's media, the spotlight, the adulation. It's understandable that one's grip on reality gets somewhat strained.
Indeed, and Le Figaro actually speaks about that childhood, or the lack of a childhood in many senses, because of course he was with the Jackson 5 on tour for a lot of his childhood. His troubled relationship with his father, who was apparently somewhat abusive, used to call him Big Nose, and of course we saw that perhaps that could have had an effect on his view of himself and on his mental health in later years. Now his legacy, of course, is also being discussed.
Dictator kind of figure, wasn't he?
He was a very tough manager.
He was tough
it seems.
With the Five, tough with the whole group, and
not just Michael, I suppose.
Pushed them to fame, as some people might say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the good and the bad, I suppose, came out of it. Now, just one last article, True Slant, which is an online news website, they're talking about his legacy. Will he be the next Elvis Presley? They're saying about the fact that fans in many of these circumstances don't want to believe that the pop icon has passed away, and many will be saying that he is alive somewhere and moonwalking, and I'm sure that those whisperings will be online. And it also says that a void like this one left in pop culture is never really filled. You saw that with Kurt Cobain when he passed away. The grunge movement never really recovered from that. And this article says that nobody is here to assume the pop throne that MJ has vacated.
Okay.
So there you go.
One interpretation, but obviously the facts of the matter, Michael Jackson now dead. James Creedon with our international press review. Reaction there around the world to the death of Michael Jackson at the age of 50. James, thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Mike.
So that is that.